In the last 25 years, the NFL has seen many great teams reach the Super Bowl but fail to win, fail to get the job done. After having a really great regular season, a phenomenal postseason, having league MVPs, all pros, franchise records, NFL records being broken, these teams just couldn't get the job done. Some may say because these players on the teams are just regular season players. They're chokers. They're not all that in the big moments. Teams such as the 2016 Atlanta Falcons, 2013 Denver Broncos, and the 2007 undefeated New England Patriots. The Atlanta Falcons had league MVP Matt Ryan. They also had all-pro wide receiver Julio Jones, a really good running game. The 2013 Denver Broncos, they had Hall of Famer Peyton Manning. After throwing 7 touchdowns in Week 1 versus the Baltimore Ravens, they will go on and take the league by force, reach the Super Bowl, and fail to win to a juggernaut defense and the Seattle Seahawks. Now we have the 2007 New England Patriots. After acquiring future Hall of Famer Randy Moss in a trade from the Oakland Raiders, this team will go on to win every single game, going 16-0, and even reaching the Super Bowl after tearing apart the AFC on their way, playing an underdog in the New York Giants, and losing after a miracle catch from David Tyree. And there are many other great teams that reached the Super Bowl but failed to win. There have also been many great teams to make the playoffs but couldn't reach the Super Bowl after having a dominant season. Teams such as the 2000 Titans, when they ran into a buzzsaw, a historical defense in the 2000 Ravens. Teams such as the 2020 and the 2021 Green Bay Packers, especially the 2020 Green Bay Packers, being the number 1 seed and losing to a wild card, didn't even win the division, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And there are many other great teams who have reached the playoffs. Their expectations were to go to the Super Bowl and win it, but they just couldn't reach the Super Bowl. And there are many teams who failed to reach the Super Bowl, let alone the playoffs, after having really good teams. And one of those teams/organizations are the late 90s, early 2000s Miami Dolphins. Now, as we know, the Miami Dolphins have not been the most successful franchise in recent years. Well, except for now, Tua just been balling out. But in the late 90s, after Dan Marino retired, the team was going through a rough phase. They didn't know what to do, lacking a identity. But they have some really great defensive pieces. They traded for a really great running back, and they just could not get the job done. And today we're going to talk about how and why they just couldn't get it done. So here we are. In the 1998 AFC wildcard round, the Miami Dolphins just lost in embarrassing fashion, 17-3 to the New England Patriots. It was clear as day that future Hall of Famer Dan Marino was on the downside, and the Miami Dolphins had to get that fixed, rather with a new quarterback, retool the O-line, retool the receiver corps, or do something, because it was clear that time is running out. And that leads us to the 1998 NFL Draft. Clearly, the Miami Dolphins could not get future Hall of Famer Peyton Manning or future DB Charles Woodson and many other great players. They had a mid to late first round pick. And what did they do with it? They selected John Avery. Now, looking at this pick, John Avery, he was not supposed to be selected this high. Okay, now there's very limited research on him and his college career, but as you can see, he's a nice shifty back, really fast, one cut, and he's gone, man. Now, there were other running backs that were way better than him, guys like Ahman Green and Michael Pittman, but they were middle to late draft picks. So I give the Dolphins that, but who they should have drafted was Charlie Batch to fill the void at quarterback that was soon to come. Now, maybe Dan Marino could have mentored him, or they just could have just slowly transitioned him like like A-Rod or, other quarterbacks that we see now. But no, they get a running back, and it was clear that, they wanted to have this run first, play defense. Now, the Miami Dolphins did have 2 second-round picks. One of those picks, they selected productive DN Kenny Mixon, and the second round pick that they used was to acquire future All-Pro corner Patrick Surtain. No, not that one. His father. So yes, the Miami Dolphins did select Patrick Surtain Sr. in the second round of the 1998 NFL Draft. Now, as you all know, he had a pretty good NFL career, being a All-Pro, I think once or twice. Coming out of high school, he was a multi-sport athlete, playing football and playing baseball and even running track. Now, in college, he was a rotational DB his first 2 years. And then his junior and senior year, he started to blow up, racking in 12 interceptions combined together for his junior and senior year. And as we know, that was his theme of his NFL career. He started off slow, not necessarily a starter from week one. He had to slowly but surely work his way and, getting more reps. And as you know, him and Sam Madison, which we'll talk about later on, they will go on to be one of the most underrated duos. So, how did the 1998 Miami Dolphins do? After acquiring a running back in the first round, after getting some really good defensive pieces in the second round, how did they do? Well, they went 10-6, which is pretty good, being second in the division, and playing the Buffalo Bills in the first round, in the wild card round, which they won 24-17, and they had a divisional round versus the Denver Broncos. How did they do? They lost 38-3. Dan Marino had one of his worst performances. Okay, he had 243 yards, which is okay, but 2 interceptions. He was sacked one time, and he had a 65.5 rating, which is terrible. Okay, and how did John Avery do? Bro was a kick returner at this point. Now, it's very crucial for me to point out his bad performance, Dan Marino, first, because during this point, the Denver Broncos were just all offense. Their defense was so mediocre, or as I thought. The team overall was a really good defensive team. They had 2 Pro Bowlers, Steve Atwater and Bill Romankowski, but I feel like Steve Atwater did not deserve that Pro Bowl, mainly because when you look at the stats, there were just other safeties that were just better than him overall, and his stats were just not all that good for the Hall of Famer. He had a couple, I think 1 or 2 interceptions, about like 50 tackles overall. It just wasn't that impressive, no sacks, but I understand that his value could be in the coverage game. It could be leadership, it could be something else, but I just felt like he should not have made that Pro Bowl. Bill, on the other hand, he had a phenomenal season. Bill Romankowski, he had a phenomenal season. He put up nearly some all-pro numbers. I mean, bro was balling out. I had no idea who this dude was until now. John Avery was a kick returner at this point. Okay, first off, heading into the 1998 season, the Miami Dolphins had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who had nearly 1,000 yards. Yes, that's his name, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He had nearly 1,000 yards, and they still drafted a running back. And they also had many other young running backs, such as Ray Neely and Jim Kitt, and they still draft another running back. But I give the Dolphins the credit because they did cut most other running backs in 1997, going into 1998, with John Avery as the rookie. So I'll give them that, gave him a lot more room to be the running back too. But it still makes no sense to me on how they have all these running backs and you still go out and draft a running back. That's also another common theme within this team. A big waste of a season, waste of a draft pick in the first round, big waste of Dan Marino's potential. I mean, because this is, again, the clock is ticking. So heading into the 1999 NFL offseason, it was pretty clear what the team had to do. They need to address the QB situation as soon as possible again. Okay, they need to get a quarterback, right? In the 1999 NFL draft, the Miami Dolphins had the 24th pick, right? And guess who they drafted? J.J. Johnson from Mississippi State in the second round. That's right, folks. The Miami Dolphins actually traded their first round pick, and they tried to fleece the Detroit Lions and the 49ers. So there were a lot of moving pieces in the trade, and I'm going to break it down one by one. So first things first, the Miami Dolphins held the 24th overall pick, and the Niners held the 27th overall pick. When they traded, the Niners received the 24th pick, which became Reggie McGrew, which was essentially a nobody. And then the Dolphins, they received the 27th pick and a 5th round pick. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't agree with that, And again, this fifth round pick is in the same exact draft, and again, neither of these players became anybody. So, taking out the Niners, the Lions, they traded their second, third, and fifth round pick all from the same draft class, in which the Lions received Aaron Gibson, which Aaron Gibson became a nobody. And again, these are terrible trades. Because first off, when you're trading draft picks, unless you're flipping that draft pick to like 2 or 3, 4 picks next to yours, you trade for future draft picks. And if you trade away first rounders, you receive future first rounders, or you receive future players who are worthy of first rounders. You don't trade for second, third, and fifth round picks. At this point, the franchise needs to just sell the team, trade everybody, and hire me as the GM. Okay, and the team passed up on Dre Bly and Patrick Kearney in the process, getting that second round pick. Now, yes, the team did draft Rob Conrad, a fullback, which will help later on in the future for this team. But you could have formed a triple threat in the corner game with Dre Bly, Sam Madison, and Patrick Surtain, but they gave up on Dre. They did not draft him. Okay, understandable, right? But looking into free agency, the team brought back both Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Stanley Pritchett, both of which are running backs. You just drafted J.J. Johnson in the 1999 draft, and you just drafted John Avery the year prior. What is this organization doing, man? The thing that confuses me the most is you have this Hall of Fame passing quarterback, but you're trying to get running backs that are mediocre, borderline trash, trying to strike gold on one of them, and your receiving game still sucks. So in 1998, the Miami Dolphins did have a decent receiver core led by 29-year-old O.J. McDuffie. Now, prior to these years, O.J. McDuffie was a receiver 2. In 98, he had 165 targets and 90 receptions. Like right over 1,000 yards, and he had 7 touchdowns. But his efficiency rating was at a career low, only catching about 54.5 targets. I mean, which is okay, I guess. But outside of his rookie year, his 94, 95, 96, and 97 year, he was catching about 62% or more of his targets. I mean, but on average, like, he didn't have any more than about 75, 76. His low was at 37 targets. That's because bro was still working into the lineup. But when he's receiver 1, I mean, he's only catching about 54% of his passes. And so what they did was to address that was to get another receiver, and that receiver was Tony Martin. So Tony Martin is a receiver out of Mississippi State College, and he was born in Miami, Florida. He was a 5th round pick in the 1989 season by the Jets, but cut, and then he was on the Miami Dolphins for about a couple seasons, and then he went on to the San Diego Chargers, even made a Super Bowl. But in his 4 years in San Diego, he had some really good productive years, as you can see on the screen. The yellow is his San Diego. The 98 season is in Atlanta, and then in 99 he was in back in Miami. And he did also make a Super Bowl with the Falcons in 98. But I think he's very forgotten because of his, again, just he has really high targets, but he has about half or even below half of his catching rate. With his lowest being 43.2% his last year in San Diego, and his highest being 55.6, which O.J. McDuffie was always in the 60s. The one year that he was in the 50s was the year that he had really high targets, and teams just centered in just on him. But I'll give it to him. He made an all-pro team in 1996, the year he had 14 touchdowns, about 1,100 yards. Bro was balling out. And so with that being said, this is pretty much, the team's last effort to win something with Dan Marino. Now, if you don't know, Dan Marino has 0 rings. He doesn't even have a Super Bowl appearance. And again, he's at the back door of his career. I mean, this is pretty much the last chance. So how did the 1999 season go for the Miami Dolphins? Now, mind you, the team is pretty much old. Most of the players are in retirement home, like Dan Marino, Tony Martin, and O.J. McDuffie. All guys were past their primes. But the defense was slowly developing, was slowly getting better, man. The team did go 9-7. They did have a playoff appearance. But let's talk about the defense for a second. They have future star Jason Taylor at DN position. He had 10 tackles for loss that year. The team had all-pro corner Sam Madison next to Patrick Surtain, who slowly but surely again got more reps during the season, man. Sam Madison, he had 7 interceptions that year. He had 1 touchdown off that pick. He had 1 forced fumble, man. Bro was going crazy that year. 50 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss. I mean, bro was just going berserk, man. So transitioning to the playoffs, the team did go 9-7 again, and they had a wild card round versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now they did win 20-17 with a classical game winner drive by Dan Marino. So on this drive, the Miami Dolphins started on the 3-yard line, and Dan Marino literally marched down the field, and they scored the game-winning touchdown. And I think up until that point, him and Jimmy Johnson were on the chopping block if they could win it all or not. Because again, this is their last time trying to win, and they get the job done. And guess who scored the game-winning touchdown? J.J. freaking Johnson, man. It was not O.J. McDuffie or Tony Martin or even Dan Marino. It was J.J. Johnson. Look at him go crazy. But they played the Jacksonville Jaguars in the divisional round. And how did that game go, you may ask? They lost 62-7. The Jaguars literally killed Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins. The very first play from the Miami Dolphins of scrimmage was a pick, and it was nearly taken back for 6. Damon Hurd came in after halftime for the Miami Dolphins after 1 possession. The Jaguars, as we know, up until this point, the Jaguars, they were a semi-good defense, and then they just blew up in the 2000s. But back then, they were like a mid-tier defense. Just in my opinion. But Dan Marino and Jimmy Johnson, this was their last game together. It was just clear that the team, the organization just had to move on. The defense really struggled this game too. They gave up up until this point, the longest play in NFL history, a 90-yard run touchdown by Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor balled out. Like, the whole Jacksonville Jaguars defense, offense balled out. They even subbed in Jay Felder in the second quarter when it was up 38-0. Which is insane to me. That is crazy. In the second quarter? That's like putting a JV quarterback in the second quarter in a varsity game versus a rival. Mind you, they're Florida rivalries. So, heading into the 2000 offseason, it was clear that Jimmy Johnson and Dan Marino were off the team. Dan Marino, he decided to just call it a career, and Jimmy Johnson and the Miami Dolphins, they decided to just part ways. So they left a big void, which again, I pointed out, they should have got a quarterback. They should have got young assets for the future, but instead they were set on this mindset of trying to win with Dan Marino, even though he's on the decline. Now, first thing first, they did trade for a quarterback in Jay Felder from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Jay Felder, he did play in that divisional game, and after they benched their starting quarterback, Jay played in the second quarter and beyond, which he did okay. But at the head coach position, they did upgrade defensive coordinator Dave Winston. He ran a 4-3 base defense. Again, this defense was very underrated, and so I like that move. How they didn't move on from the defensive coordinator, they actually kept him and they upgraded him to head coach, knowing that he's a big part of this team, of this defense actually. And so again, they got the head coach I like, the quarterback I don't like. You got a career backup, I don't like that. And also, they did not have a first round pick this year. They also decided to trade that back in 1998 to the Carolina Panthers, which I forgot to mention up. I'm sorry about that. And besides that, they did bring in some running back pieces. First things first, they brought in Thurman Thomas, an aging running back. This is his last year in the NFL. Bro was on E, like his tank was on E. But they also brought in a really underrated signing, Lamar Smith. Now, Lamar Smith, he was a career backup up until this point, but in the year 2000, bro really did ball out. He had a career year, but we're going to talk about that later on. So with all that being said, and these little minor moves, being made by the Miami Dolphins, how did they do? Well, they improved first and foremost, being from 9-7 to 11-5, making them the divisional champions. Now, they did have a home game in the wild card round versus the Indianapolis Colts, which they edged out 23-17. Now Lamar Smith, he actually balled out this game. Lamar Smith was going to have 40 carries, 290 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But in the division round, they would face the Oakland Raiders. Now, so in the division round, the Miami Dolphins had to go to Oakland to play the Oakland Raiders. Now, up until this point, the Oakland Raiders, they had a old quarterback in Rich Gannon and a 34-year-old Tim Brown. But it didn't really matter because the Oakland Raiders dominated the Dolphins 27-0. Now, this time, Mr. Lamar Smith did not play so well versus a top 5 run defense. He only had 5 yards on 8 carries. It was pretty clear that earlier in the game that running the ball is just not it. And he also got injured. Jay Felder, he possibly played worse, having 3 interceptions, not only in the division round but also in the wild card round. So they're back on square one. They need a quarterback. And it was clear if Lamar did not carry versus Indy in the wild card round, they were losing that game. I mean, oof. So the 2000 season is just pretty much, it was nothing to really talk about. I mean, boom. But heading to the 2001 offseason, Thurman Thomas, he called it a career. Bro was done. So in the 2001 offseason, also they had a first round pick. Now, what did they do with it? They drafted Jamar Fletcher, a defensive back. Which you can argue that yes, they could need a slot defensive back, a slot corner, but I still think they should have drafted Reggie Wayne or Todd Heap, 2 players that could have helped them. But in the second round, they did draft Chris Chambers. I mean, yes, he's a productive receiver, but you've passed up on Todd Heap, a really good tight end, and Reggie Wayne, the future Hall of Famer. To me, that's an L. That's a major L, and you really did not need a defensive back, especially when your secondary is already deep. Like, come on now. Now, we also got to talk about the defense in 2000. Now, in the 2000 season, the Miami Dolphins were balling out, actually. They had 6 games where they didn't give up more than 10 points. They had 5 games where they had more than 3 or more interceptions, sorry. And there was a great third down team, only allowing 33.2% on conversions, which was 4th in the league, and it was top 10 in red zone conversions with 44.7%, I'm sorry. And Jason Taylor was 5th in sacks with 14.5 sacks. New addition Brian Walker, he was 3rd in interceptions with 7, and Sam Madison made his 2nd straight All-Pro team. And let's not forget that Patrick Surtain was also in the starting lineup at this point, and Bro was balling out also. So this defense, I mean, they can easily just walk away and say, you know what, like, I'm wasting my prime, I'm wasting my talent, and, for this piss poor organization. I'm about to head on out of here, dog. But no, they all stayed together with actually Jason Taylor. He signed a 6-year deal, which was pretty massive at the time, and Bro still had a bright future. So what happened in 2001, you may ask? They went 11-5 again, but this time they was 2nd in the division, and they had a wild card berth at the Baltimore Ravens. Now, although the team took a little step back on the defense side of the ball, although Fedler struggled with 20 touchdowns and 19 interceptions, they still lost to the Baltimore Ravens. And this is the year that the Ravens lost Jamal Lewis. If you don't know, in the year 2001, it was the first season of Hard Knocks, and Jamal Lewis actually tore his ACL during the shooting, during the practice. Like, Bro was out for the season, so the Ravens, they had to hurry up, scramble, and get some running back pieces. And pretty much, Terry Allen and Jason Brookins, they went crazy. I mean, they obviously carry the offense because the Ravens at this point, they didn't have a quarterback also. And Jay Felder, he barely had 100 yards, and he threw 1 interception, and he was sacked 3 times. So again, another wasted year with a top tier defense. And oof. So in the 2002 offseason, again, the clock is ticking. How well can this defense keep on performing at a high level? The offense has to hold their end. I mean, just play better. Just play a little bit better. I'm not saying play like the Rams or the Patriots or even the Colts. Just play mid-tier, a little bit average, or just play a little bit above average. So the team, first things first, they traded for a superstar, future All-Pro running back Ricky Williams. Yes, man, you heard that correctly. They gave up on Lamar Smith. He let him walk in free agency, and they traded two future first-round picks to the Saints for the young upcoming running back, man. After reaching a 1,000 yards twice back to back and even 800 yards in his rookie year, they gave him a chance, man, and bro did not disappoint, man. So now it was clear they have an identity now. They finally have the running back that they were looking for. After all these miscellaneous running backs with John Avery, J.J. Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they finally got their running back. And Ricky freaking Williams, man. In 2002, it was looking like they was finna do something special, man. They started off 3-0. Ricky had 394 yards and 4 total touchdowns in those 3 games. Now, in week 4, the defense had to crumble against Trent Green and Tony Gonzalez. And if you don't know, Trent Green had 5 touchdowns, which is a career day for him, And Tony G, he also had a career day also. In the defense, when you give about 48 points to a Trent Green, then yeah, you're going to lose. And they lost 48-30. And now Ricky, he did struggle, but Felder, he finally kind of balled out just a little bit, having about 300 yards, but threw 4 interceptions. And the next couple of games, again, they just relied on Ricky. Now, although Felder got hurt and they put in Ray Lucas, the team went 4-4, dropping to the Bills twice, a divisional rivalry, and they even lost to the Packers and the Jets. And the Jets also a divisional rivalry. So heading into week 14, the team needed a lot of luck from their divisional rivalries, but they also needed to win their games also, which they beat the Bears 27-9 to beat the Raiders. But in week 16, they would lose to the Vikings 20-17, and Ricky Williams did struggle. And every time Ricky had under 100 yards rushing, the team would pretty much lose. And versus Minnesota, it was no different. He had 66 rushing yards. Now, heading into week 17, they will go on to play the New England Patriots, and Ricky did have over 180 yards, but the defense gave up 11 straight points in the 4th quarter. This was Tom Brady's one of his first ever big performances in the 4th quarter, one of those classic Tom Brady comebacks, bro. He went crazy. Now the Dolphins offense, they could not sniff a first down after 5 minutes in the 4th quarter. They just could not move the ball. But it was pretty simple. Again, tunnel in on Ricky Williams and let Jay Felder beat you by his arm, not by Ricky Williams and his legs, which was pretty simple. And pretty much the defense crumbled, man. And they went into overtime, and the Patriots won 27-24, just eliminating the Dolphins from making the playoffs, man. And besides that, they were going a downslope. As we all know, the Miami Dolphins, they would go years without pretty much seeing success, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, yes, in 2003, they did pretty good, but in 04 and beyond, they was really mediocre. Now, parts of it was because Ricky Williams did retire, and he did get suspended for a year. And, but besides that, the Dolphins offensively just have not been all that up until now with Tua and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It is week 18, maybe the wild card round, depending on when this video drops. But the Miami Dolphins have been playing really, really good on both sides of the ball the past few years. But I just want to highlight this early 2000 team and, just to talk about how, they have so much potential, but they pretty much fumble it all away. Now, if you like the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, man. And we are out, man. Peace.